Hello and welcome to Gav Tries to Fix, the only repair show hosted by an utter buffoon. I got this Atari 2600 which was listed as spares and repairs on eBay. I paid about 14 quid for it, I think. I can't remember. But yeah, it didn't power up, so it said in the listing. So I'm getting it on my bench now and I'm going to take a look and see why it doesn't power up. This is rattling. I think before I power this up, I'm going to pull it apart. So it's usually not sensible to put voltage into something that's rattling, especially if it's something metal sounding that's rattling around in there. That's one of the few sensible pieces of advice I do know. So I took a good look at all the sides and then started popping it apart. Now it doesn't have any screws in, but it does have plastic tabs, so the screws are missing. I'll replace those. I've pulled this apart and there was a couple of rattly bits of plastic in it. And I think I can tell you why it doesn't power up. So if we have a look here, these switches, they've got nothing on them. There's nothing that can move up and down to make and break the connection. If I manually make the connection, see it powers up. It's a bit clumsy, but... And here we have something. So let's try with the game. Old faithful. Let's see if we can get that going. Nothing on screen but snow. Just wondering if I can make a connection here as well. If it needs a connection on the TV. That is interesting. So what I know at this point is the switch is broken, and even if I hardwire the switch, it's not working. The signal's garbage. So at this point I'm sort of wiggling the cartridge, I'm chasing voltages around the board. I'm suspicious immediately of that big fat cap on the left. Here I've shorted the circuit with a red wire to make it be on all the time. I'm doing all sorts of stuff trying to figure out what's going on with this switch. I've used my ESR meter on the caps so I can test them in series, and yeah, I'm just sort of bodging around. Now, following voltages and following waveforms, so I've got my oscilloscope out there. I'm not showing on screen, but that's what I'm doing. I'm prodding away, trying to sort out what's going where. I'm having a look at all the waveforms, anything that looks like a clock. I'm having a look at, what voltages are high, what voltages are low, making sure I've got current on all the pins that should have current on the chips, and I'm making sure that grounds go to grounds. And at this point, I'm pulling that RF shield off, which is an absolute pig. Because it's got these little twists of metal. It's a nightmare. Then I'm desoldering caps. I'm recapping it. Pull the cap off, testing it to see if it's any good, and it does measure good. But I replace those caps there, just because they're by the RF modulator, and I'm thinking, well, is it something to do with those caps? Are they supposed to be smoothing the video? So I replace those. I wire it back up. Have another go. Still not good. And here we go. I'm desoldering. Oh yeah, it was a potentiometer. So the last Atari I fixed, I had a busted color adjust potentiometer, so that's what I'm removing there towards the left of the board, because obviously that has to do with the RF, that has to do with the video rather. So I'm pulling that. It didn't want to come out, this one. I had to use my desolder gun and solder braid and all kinds of stuff. That desoldering gun is not great, or I'm not using it right, or I haven't cleaned it right. I'm not sure really. I'm looking for potentiometers there. It's a B500K, so I'm going through my stash and finding the right unit. It takes me a little while. There's a few candidates, but without this working, because it had fallen to bits, without this working, you can't adjust the colours on screen. So it was a reasonable assumption that this had something to do with the no output problem, because I can fix the switch later. So there we go. That's going in. Lots of bits of wire coming out there. Yeah, there's the switch. So what I'm doing with that switch is I'm hardwiring two of the pins, so it's just on all the time. See, it was the little red light was on. I'm cleaning the cartridge port, cleaning the board, just seeing if that makes any difference. Powered up, still no good. So adjusted the signal, made no difference. Contact cleaners going in, really getting in there, making sure there was a bit of lint in that cartridge port, but no, I couldn't find anything. So at this point, I've got a bit of paper. You can wrap it around a credit card, that works quite well, but I don't want to risk exposing my credit card number. So yeah, just getting in there, cleaning it out as best as I can. So those contacts they don't look too bad actually. They weren't rusty. I couldn't see any problem there. So I'm still not getting video at this point, and the audio is still like still not coming through either. So at that point, I'm taking a loosen the voltage regulator, replace some of the thermal paste under that to see if that made any difference. I mean, the voltage regulator was given a perfect 5 volts, 5.06, something like that, absolutely fine. I've removed a cap there. I'm going to replace that. So yeah, I pull out any cap that's a electrolytic and replace those. Now apparently on these boards there are some weird looking caps that look a bit like resistors. Now I've replaced 2 of those already by the modulator. You can get lists of them. It's very common failure points. So for the different models, of which there are many of this board designed in 77, and I think this is like a early 80s, like 83 sort of board. It might be 86. I can't remember this particular PAL Junior that I'm working on. There's all sorts of revisions of these, so many. So yeah, I'm cleaning up on the back. I've recapped it. I can't recap at this point that big fat cap on the left, but I do order one on eBay. There we go, pull in a few more caps. I mean, you're never doing the wrong thing by recapping it, right? Unless you've literally just done it. Because these electrolytic caps are 40 years old in here nearly, and they're good. Well, if not 40 years old, they're going to fail at some point. So replacing that potentiometer and those caps will give me the best shot, giving a good clean up. The solution, I'm absolutely going to kick myself, by the way. Obviously, this is future Gav recording this voiceover. I will absolutely kick myself. But I did have to fix all those things anyway. So I'm checking the chips there. What I've done is I've looked up which chips are which, so I have to refer to my notes. Gav grabs his notes. So the one at the top is the Riot chip. The one at the bottom is the TIA, and the 6507 CPU is in the middle. It's like a 6502, but like bunk. It's missing loads of the pins apparently. And what I'm doing there is, I'm checking again voltages and like clock style signals. I don't find like a crystal or anything on this board. I don't know if I'm missing it. But yeah, and then you've got another chip off to the right, which is I think a hex array. So a bunch of hex inverters, which is something to do with the video. So yeah, I'm learning slowly about this board, but obviously other people are way smarter than me. And yeah, I'm checking for the same square waves that I'm seeing around the board. I'm just sort of desperately following square waves around and seeing if they suddenly stop.
Checked every pin here, and every pin connects to somewhere on one of these 3 chips. Looks okay as far as I can tell.
So at this point I'd done a lot of research. I went away and I came back. I started doing a lot of reading. Here I'm checking the voltage regulator again. I'm just desperately hoping it's something simple like that, but it's not. So I'm pulling up the specs there and I'm checking the voltages on the chips, and got my little diagram going there. Yeah, I spent an awful lot of time doing this. And then I started looking at the RF modulator. I took the lid off it and I noticed there's a set screw in there. No, I haven't noticed it yet at this point in the video. I'm still measuring things, but I was started to measure the signals inside the RF modulator, and they still looked good.
So I probe it. Get a weird little signal, not a lot. Now, if I put a game in, it does start looking different on the signal, but I don't know what that's telling me, if anything. Let's bring this back up. It's a more sophisticated looking signal, but it's still just I don't know what I should be looking for there. I've been probing around in here and not really found a lot to go on. So there's no signal. Sort of poke around, seeing if I can get anything, wiggle it about, nothing. And I've obviated that bit just to take it out of the circuit, so I'm going straight out of the modulator. I won't be surprised if the modulator's gone.
Oh, how frustrating. I'd been millimetres from the solution. and I'd gone back to the cartridge port because it's more obvious. And at this point, I'm going through forums and checking what people say, which is always a good thing to do. And at this point, I start desoldering the audio caps, which are known to fail. So there's two caps that look a bit like weird-looking diodes, but they're actually capacitors. I can't remember what kind of thing they are. I should look it up, really, but it's late. I'm tired. And I pulled them out, and they tested as okay. But then I left them out the board. I didn't replace them because they're just to do with audio. Without them, you just get a static noise. So if they failed, usually that's why you get static on an Atari 2600 Junior. So at this point, I'm looking for replacements. Spoiler alert, I don't have any, even in the enormous amount of components I've got. They're 820 picofarad caps. They're very specialist.
Oh snap. Check it. By jabbing this in the RF modulator, I've got it going. I ain't got no sound because I've ripped those caps out, so that's why it's buzzing. So let me replace them caps.
At this point, I very frantically resoldered the capacitors that I'd removed. Get them back on the board so that I can test if it works with audio this time. I'm super delighted to have had video working, quite frankly, at this point.
Okay, so this is working. If I turn the volume up and I give it some... It's working. The joystick's responding as it should.
So that's great. At this point, I can just disassemble it and start doing a bit of maintenance stuff. So I have the voltage regulator there, and I figure I'll replace it because it's 40 odd years old. And I bought a box of voltage regulators. I believe this is an 8507, completely standard. I mean, the one that was on there was absolutely fine. So I'm really just doing this kind of future-proofing thing to hopefully keep this console running. But to be honest, I could just run it. If it fails, it would just destroy the board. So fine. But yeah, I pull it out and I start wicking up the excess solder. It's a bit tricky to get out because there's 3 legs to pull at once. What I should have done, right? What I should have done is just cut the legs, pull it from there, but I didn't. So yeah, I got those voltage regulators. Probably told me that Bojack is a bad brand anyway, as what they had on Amazon's. With all the caps, I go for Panasonic if I can, or definitely Japanese ones. I try not to get the knockoffs, but you never know, do you? You buy stuff and it's flipping knockoff half the time. So yeah, I'm still trying to get this voltage regulator out, and I've removed all the thermal paste with isopropanol alcohol. Even though I refreshed the thermal paste, I figured I'd completely remove it, get it proper clean, and then start again, get some completely fresh thermal paste on. So yeah, I'm just checking my contact points there to make sure I solder it correctly. It's getting it nice and clean. Go through a couple of ends of Q-tips there. In the spray bottle, I've got my isopropyl alcohol. It's so much easier than trying to dab it on. I don't like it when people put it in the cap of the bottle because, like, you're just pouring the impurities back into the IPA in here. Unless you chuck it down the sink, I guess, or drink it. Don't drink it, you'll die. So yeah, popping all this back together, getting the excess off. Nice new voltage regulator. I still haven't got it off. Ooh, I'm going to have to fast forward this even faster, aren't I? Come on, Gavin, get a move on. Honestly, I've seen football matches shorter than this. There we go.
My parts have arrived. These are RCA jack sockets. These are going to be for a future thing where I do a mod on an identical console to this that hasn't got an RF modulator. So I'm going to RGB it up. These are to replace those weird caps, and these are the big axial caps. So that replaces the big main cap. So I'm going to have this back open, and I'm going to get a reassembly done.
Repairing things is immensely frustrating. First of all, I don't know what I'm doing. And secondly, it takes ages for parts to come, doesn't it? Like, you order it, and I know, first world problems, right? It's sometimes 2 or 3 days, but it feels like forever, by which time I'm a bit out the swing. But my capacitors had arrived. So that big, chunky axial capacitor, which means like the wire seems to go straight through it, I've got some replacements there. They're 2200 UFs. I can't remember what's nano, what's pico, what's farad. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I get my desoldering gun out, whip that off, and it actually came off quite nicely, using a bit of desoldering braid to clean up the holes. Massive, terrible greying head in the way. And then there's my axial capacitors. Now, it took me a little bit of time to figure out which way round the capacitor goes. So I went back and reviewed my footage. But then at that point I got straight back in there and started soldering. With the capacitor back in place, I snip off the legs, turn it over and put the only game I own in, wire it all back together and give it a test. So I've got a thumbs up there on the camera very briefly.
I'm circumspect about this because the sound is fine, but these caps apparently are prone to failure. And what I've gone for is, it was very expensive to buy dedicated replacements, but these are 820 picofarad caps. So I'm going to try replacing these and just see if the sound still works.
Here I desolder the Fancy Dan caps that it came with, and I put in these basic radial caps that are the same value. Let's find out if it works, because when it doesn't, it just makes an horrible buzzing noise. So yeah, back in with the old cap there. I think that was an unsuccessful experiment. So, with that put back, let's summarise the repairs to date. The cartridge slot and the board has been cleaned front and back. The power switches, which is totally broken, it was just hard soldered on the back. And I'd love to replace that. I have made inquiries, but I'd like to replace it with one the same rather than just, bodge any old switch in. The RF modulator has been fixed. It's now tuned in correctly. The little potentiometer is now fixed, which deals with the colour settings. The power regulator has been replaced, and there's been a preemptive recap of the board. None of the caps had failed, but they've all been replaced with high quality new capacitors, so this should last for a good long time. And the next thing I'm going to do is clean the casing, but first I'm going to refit all the internal shielding. But I'm sticking the RF shielding back on. This, if you're using RF, reduces interference. It's not really necessary if you do a composite or RGB mod, which I will do at some point. It's really hard to get back on because it's got these little twisty legs that go through that hold it together, and sort of it's the metal will fatigue every time you open it and close it. It took me ages to get the legs, what's left of them, from the disassembly lined up, and then I'm just bending them rather than twisting them because it's a lot easier to get open and closed. Bit of a clean with IPA then, and then decided to clean the casing. I'm very carefully giving this a scrub with a toothbrush with some soapy water. A bit too soapy because I get it in clean water, can't get it clean. What I'm trying to do is avoid the sticker on the back, when my mistake was to try to avoid it rather than to remove the sticker and then try to reattach it later. I'm not known for my skills with glue, so I've gone off and got a spudger there because I'm removing the buttons. I'm going to give the buttons a clean. There's a little ribbon cable there that I'm removing as well, which is and look at that bit of like earwax stuff that came out of it. There's some weird stuff beyond the buttons. There's like this earwax stuff. And then behind one of them there was this stuff that was like a sandy paste. So yeah, it's very odd. Anyway, who knows how this stuff gets in here. So yeah, give it a good scrub-a-dub. And here I'm drying it out. Now I do leave it overnight to dry as well, but I'm trying to make sure water doesn't get onto the labels or anything like that too much. So I'm using a very thin bit of metal to get the tea towel in there and dry it out as best as possible. One of the difficult things is screw posts, letting those dry out. I mean, when are they drying? But yeah, this comes up nicely and is nice and clean. It wasn't in that bad nick anyway, but it's just decent. And at the end I ran it under the tap. But yeah, that sticker on the back got a bit done in. So that'll be drying overnight. And in this scene here, I'm just cleaning up the contact strip with some IPA. Again, it wasn't dirty, but just covering all the bases. And then the next thing to do is put it back together and hope it all still works.
Bling. This should be dried out by now. Can't see that it wouldn't be. Okay, and then let's do the funny bit.
Yep. All good. I've got a website. Remember those? gavd.co.uk.